In ancient Israel, being a shepherd wasn't some poetic image. It was a matter of life and death. The land was dry, rugged, and dangerous. Sheep couldn't find water on their own, and they certainly couldn't defend themselves against predators. If a flock lost its shepherd, they weren't just lost, they were doomed. So, for the people of Israel, the word shepherd meant leadership, protection, and hope. It was such a powerful idea that they even called God himself their shepherd. And their deepest, most painful wound was this: they had leaders, kings, and priests who were supposed to be shepherds, but they only cared for themselves. No one seemed to truly care for the sheep, the people. That's why Jesus' words were so utterly shocking when he stood up and declared, "I am the good shepherd." To their ears, this wasn't just a gentle, comforting metaphor. It was a claim so bold, so audacious, that only God could make it. But then Jesus went even further. He said, "I know my sheep." He didn't see a faceless crowd or a number. He saw each one, personally, individually. And then, he said something completely unthinkable in that culture. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. You see, in that world, a hired hand, a regular shepherd, would run away the second a wolf appeared. You might protect the sheep, but you would never die for them. No one died for sheep. But Jesus was redefining everything. He was showing them what true leadership, true love, really looks like. It's not about power or position. It's about sacrifice. It's not about being served, but about giving one's life for others. This wasn't just a nice story about shepherding. It was a quiet, profound announcement of the cross, the ultimate sacrifice he was about to make. And today, you and I might not be walking through literal deserts, but we still hear so many voices every single day. There are the voices of fear, anxiety, and doubt. The voices of success and hustle, telling us what we should chase. Voices from every direction telling us who we should be. Amid all that noise, Jesus does not shout. He calls. He speaks your name. And those who have been loved by him, those who have felt his care, they recognize his voice. The Good Shepherd doesn't force us to follow. He stands at the gate, his arms open, and he waits. So the question for us today is not whether the shepherd is speaking. He is. The real question is, whose voice are you listening to? Thanks for watching. If this resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more. But the story does not end with the shepherd's voice. In ancient Israel, sheep did not follow commands. They followed trust. They followed the one who walked ahead of them, who knew the path before danger appeared. The shepherd did not drive the sheep from behind with shouts and prods. He went first. Every single step was a risk he took before they ever had to. This is why Jesus said, "The sheep follow me because they know my voice." Knowing that voice was not something learned in a moment. It was formed through time, through protection, through provision, through wounds that were healed and paths that were survived together. Jesus was not offering a promise of safety without cost. He was offering something far more profound, his presence. Think about it: a hired shepherd stays while it is convenient, while the pasture is green and the weather is calm. But when the wolf comes, he calculates the price and decides it is too high. The Good Shepherd does not calculate, he stays. And in staying, he reveals something that can be unsettling. To be truly cared for is to be vulnerable. To follow is to trust someone more than you trust yourself. For the people listening to Jesus all those years ago, this meant letting go of the false shepherds in their lives, the voices that promised control, status, or an illusion of certainty. The Good Shepherd promised none of those things. He promised life, and not an easy life, but a life that could not be taken away, a life with true meaning. And perhaps this is the hardest part of the story for us to accept today, because sheep are safest when they stay close to the shepherd. But closeness requires surrender. It means allowing yourself to be known, even in your weakness, even in your fear. The Good Shepherd knows when we wander. He does not shame the lost sheep. He goes after it. He searches for it not because it is strong, but because it is his. And even now, this story continues. It's not playing out in ancient deserts or stone sheepfolds, but in the quiet moments of your own life, where a voice calls you by name. When Jesus spoke, The people didn't hear a theory. They heard their own lives. He looked at them and said, "I am the gate for the sheep." This wasn't some abstract idea. In their villages, the sheepfold at night had no wooden door. The shepherd himself would lie down across the narrow opening, becoming the gate. Nothing could get to the sheep unless it passed through him first. So when Jesus said those words, the meaning was crystal clear. True life, real safety, would reach them only by passing through him. Then he spoke again, gently but with a firm sadness. "All who came before me are thieves and robbers." You could feel the grief in his voice, not anger. The people knew exactly who he was talking about. They had been crushed by endless rules, measured by their outward appearance, and judged without a shred of mercy by religious leaders who were supposed to care for them. These leaders had taken, not given. They had burdened, not lifted. Jesus continued, his voice ringing with purpose, "I came that they may have life, and have it abundantly." This wasn't a promise of an easy, comfortable life. It was a promise of a full life. A life overflowing with meaning, purpose, and connection. A life rooted not in fear of judgment, but in the deep security of belonging to a shepherd who would lay down his life for them. As he taught, he painted a picture of what a true shepherd does. He doesn't just count the sheep, he knows them by name. He actively seeks the one who is lost, leaving the 99 to bring it home. He tenderly binds up the wounds of the injured. He carries the weak and the young on his shoulders. As the crowd listened, the ancient words of their prophets must have echoed in their minds how God himself had promised that one day he would come and search for his scattered, wounded sheep and be their shepherd. In that moment, they were seeing the prophecy unfold right before their eyes. Then, Jesus said something that must have sent a shockwave through the crowd. "I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold." In that single, revolutionary sentence, centuries-old walls began to crumble. Faith was no longer a private inheritance guarded by bloodlines or geography. The family of God, the flock, was suddenly wider, more inclusive, and more radical than anyone had ever imagined. It was a flock that would one day include people from every tribe, nation, and tongue. But the teaching didn't just end with comforting promises. Jesus looked at the faces before him and laid out the cost. "Whoever wants to follow me," he said, "must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow." The Good Shepherd didn't offer a path that avoids suffering. He offered a path straight through it, promising to walk it with them. He wasn't promising a life without a cross, but a life where the cross leads to resurrection. The people stood there, wrapped in a profound silence. They understood. To follow this shepherd meant leaving behind the flimsy security of their own efforts and their old identities. It meant trusting his voice even when the path ahead led into darkness, into uncertainty, into sacrifice. It meant letting go of control. And yet, there was something in his words, in his very presence, that they couldn't deny. And so, the teaching came to its silence. Jesus didn't wrap up with a round of applause. He concluded with a life. The people gathered there would soon see, in the most vivid and heart-wrenching way, what his words truly meant. It wasn't going to be in another sermon, not in a parable spoken to a crowd. It would be on a desolate hill just outside the city walls, a place of execution where the shepherd did not run. The wolf came. The danger was not a metaphor. It was real, visceral, and terrifying. The religious leaders, the Roman soldiers, the mob, the wolf was there in many forms. And the shepherd stayed. He stood his ground. He didn't just talk about laying down his life in theory, as a noble idea to be admired. He laid it down on a rough, wooden cross. There, on that hill, the voice that once so gently called the sheep, the voice that calmed storms and spoke with authority, was almost drowned out by the agony of crucifixion. The jeers of the crowd, the cries of pain, the sheer weight of it all tried to silence him. But even then, even in that moment of ultimate suffering, it was not a voice of fear or regret. It was a voice of love, a love carried to the very end, a love that prayed for forgiveness for his executioners. But here is the most important part. The story of the Good Shepherd was never meant to be a historical account, a tale locked away in the past. It's not just something we read about. It moves forward, quietly but persistently, weaving its way into every generation, into our lives right now, because every single human heart, yours and mine included, still faces the same fundamental choice that those people faced 2,000 years ago. You see, there will always be many voices clamoring for our attention. It's a constant barrage. There are voices that promise control, telling us if we just work harder, plan better, or buy this thing, we can finally be in charge of our destiny. There are voices that promise safety, urging us to build walls, to never take a risk, to stay where it's comfortable and predictable. There are voices that promise an easier road, a shortcut to happiness that avoids any struggle or sacrifice. These voices are loud, they're persuasive, and they are everywhere. But the voice of the shepherd is different. It cuts through the noise with a quiet clarity. It doesn't promise a life free of trouble or discomfort. In fact, it often leads through valleys and difficult terrain. What it does promise is presence. I will be with you. It doesn't promise that you'll have all the answers, a neat and tidy map for your entire life. It doesn't promise certainty. What it does promise is life itself, real, abundant, meaningful life that starts now and stretches into eternity. And here's the most personal part of it all. That voice still calls by name. He knows you, not as a number in a crowd, but as an individual with your unique hopes, fears, and history. He calls you by name, and he doesn't call from a distant, untouchable throne, but from a place of sacrifice, from the foot of the cross, showing the lengths he went to for you. The gate he spoke of, the one that leads to life, remains open. The shepherd still waits, patiently, lovingly. And so, the question is no longer about the story itself. It's not about whether you believe the historical facts. The question is now about you. What will you do with this call? In the middle of all the other voices, will you trust the one voice that offers not an easy life, but an eternal one? Will you trust the voice of the shepherd enough to follow? Thanks for listening. If this resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more content like this.